Hello, good people. It is 2 o'clock and we are back for another round of our virtual symposium on celebrating the works of Jordan Peele. Hey, y'all. Hey. My name is Terésa Dowell-Vest, Professor Terésa Dowell-Vest. Most people around these parts call me TDV, my initials, TDV. So feel free to do that as well. It's much easier half the time than Terésa Dowell-Vest, although I do love my name. It's my brand. But we are here for another session of the Nightmares from Monkeypaw virtual symposium on the works of Mr. Jordan Peele. We're also amplifying Black horror cinema here at KPVU-TV on the campus of Prairie View A&M University in Prairie View, Texas, United States of America. Yes, my students are coming back from lunch and various activities that they're experiencing because it's homecoming week here at Prairie View. And if you've ever been to a homecoming at an HBCU, child's like going home, coming. It's a homecoming. It's like church. It's a good time. They have all kinds of concerts going on. I'm rocking my purple and gold, but doing it with a little bit of a little something flair. And we are celebrating Black horror films in general, but in particular, Mr. Jordan Peele has since 2017 has dropped so many wonderful gems on us that makes us think about society, makes us look at the world a little bit differently. Just an incredible and exciting person to follow in his work. If you joined us earlier today, you saw that we started off with M.F.A. She was our keynote speaker this morning, and she kicked everything off wonderfully by analyzing all of Jordan Peele's work through the string theory, which looks at how we fit in society and how through cultural studies and narrative paradigms, we create stories and they impact society, and in return, society impacts stories. And she just did a fantastic job relaying just so many wonderful aspects of Peele's work through that particular lens. We then moved into our first panel session this morning, and we were looking at Get Out, in particular, the film Get Out, the 2017 juggernaut of a film that really changed the course of how we see Jordan Peele as an artist, as a writer, as a filmmaker, as a storyteller, as an anthropologist in America. Through the lens of Get Out, the birth of a new direction in horror, we had Dr. Fred Bonner from right here on our campus, Prairie View A&M University. He spoke of the disembodiment of Black faculty and staff identity at predominantly white institutions. And then Dr. Heather Addison from UNLV, University of Nevada at Las Vegas, she spoke of the sunken place, possession and paranoia in the film Get Out. And now we're moving into our second session. I guess it technically is our third session, but it's our second panel session with two amazing scholars that I'm excited to share with you today. These two guys, they, after looking at their work and learning more about them as two individuals on the planet, I see that these are two guys who love the horror genre. As we approach Halloween, they're going to talk about some intellectual properties that are typically amplified during this time of year. Films that are celebrated, but also films that are a bit more obscure and we've not heard from in a good minute. And when I tell you, I'm excited to talk to Dr. Donald, let me just turn this down a little bit, Dr. Donald Diefenbach, and Nicholas Smith. These two gentlemen are going to impart a lot of wisdom on current Black horror cinema. I'm going to welcome, these gentlemen to the table and say good afternoon. I'm going to drink my lemonade because I just got choked just now. Let me fix that. That's a horror film right there. Go ahead. Hey, Don, tell us how you're doing today.
Doing well today. Thanks so much for having me and including me in the symposium.
Outstanding. How are you doing today, Nick?
I'm doing great. Thanks for inviting me, Professor. I really enjoyed Mo's keynote speech and everything that's been going on.
Yeah, outstanding. Good. She was fantastic, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. So we're going to get right into it. I'm going to give you a proper introduction here in a moment before you present your particular works. But I'm going to start off with the question that we are asking all of our audience, and that will give us a good litmus test of how you're feeling and what you think of Mr. Peele's work in particular, because your presentations aren't necessarily focused on Jordan Peele's work. You're looking at horror cinema in general, which I'm excited about. But before we get into that, Nick, let's start with Nick. Tell us about your favorite of Jordan Peele's work, whether he served as director or producer. Tell us about your favorite picks among Peele's work.
That's a tough one. That's tough. Get Out is great because it's such an example of tight storytelling, but I have to go for Nope because I like the underdog, and not everyone liked it as much as Get Out, but I thought it was incredible. Partly because as a filmmaker, I loved all the little Easter eggs, the notes about filmmaking, but also it was a great story. There was a lot to unpack, and it definitely was a way homer. So I was thinking about it on the way home.
Excellent. Yeah, Nope was an amusement park ride. It felt like it was just like, you know what it is? I think, Don, if you could turn your volume down just a touch, I think that's what's giving us a little bit of feedback there. There we go. Yep, I don't hear myself anymore. Good. With Nope, it was just so out of left field at times. It was such a great amusement park ride, great commentary on the film industry and how we can tend to use up certain demographics of folks, or not pay attention to a particular demographic, and then when things are miraculous and wonderful, we tend to use it up until it's abused in a sense. Wonderful commentary on a variety of things. Hey, Don, tell us about your favorite Jordan Peele film.
I'll go with Get Out. It's elegant, it's effective, and most important for me, it's visceral. The argument isn't made in an intellectual way. It's made in a way that the audience feels, and that affected me and really stayed with me.
I feel like the early days of Zoom, where I'm sitting here talking and my mic is muted, and I was the one who kept saying, "Oh, your mic is muted. Oh, your mic is muted," and here I am with my muted mic. Thank you so much for that, Don. There is no shortage of exploring Jordan's work and where he is going to go. But let's talk today through your work about the history and the legacy, excuse me, of Black horror cinema. And let's get into your respective presentations. Who would like to go first? While you think about it, I'm going to introduce you both properly. We're going to start off with Don Diefenbach. Diefenbach, yes. A professor of mass communications at the University of North Carolina, Asheville. He teaches video production, media effects, and film studies courses there at UNCA. Don's research focuses on media violence, media portrayals of mental health issues, television content analysis, and cultivation analysis. He's co-authored a chapter that links cultivation and third-person effect theories, literatures, which appear in a book called Living with Television Now. His video production credits include educational, corporate, and nationally broadcast programming, and he is co-authoring Video Production Techniques, Theory and Practice from Concept to Screen, and its second edition. We need to order that for our program. I think we need to do that right now. That sounds outstanding. Do we not have that? That sounds familiar. We need to order that book. I'm talking to one of my students over here, one of my producers over here. There you go. I'm sitting here going, we need to have that book, and we're going to do that. All right, and then we have Nick Smith. He's a best-selling writer and award-winning videographer with 27 years in the industry. This man he's done it all. He's highly skilled in video editing, He's worked in feature films, short films, commercials, music videos, you name it, he's done it. He possesses an M.F.A. in cinematography and film production from Miami International University in arts of art and design. And I missed where I did not say where Don has a BA in film and video from Pennsylvania State University. He has an MS in television, radio, and film, TRF, from the Newhouse School of Public Communications at Syracuse. And my man has a PhD in mass comm, also from Syracuse as well. These are two brilliant scholars. And that's who we're talking to in this virtual symposium. We're looking at film through the lens of scholars. These two men are going to talk to you about Black horror cinema here today. Any takers on who wants to go first? We flip a coin?
Sure. Yes, absolutely.
Well, tell you what, Don, why don't you start us off? We're going to go alphabetically, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay. And let me ask this, are we able to run my slides, or will we do this without slides?
Well, tell you what, go ahead and get started, and I am going to see if we can get your slides up finally.
Okay. Well, my presentation is entitled Defining Blaxploitation and Black Voices in Horror Film, looking at the works from William Crain to Jordan Peele. An overarching component of this session is the film Us. It's looking at us collectively. And while my presentation isn't about Jordan Peele's Us specifically, in watching that, I noticed connections and commonalities to some of the earlier films that I include in my exploration. Us includes this idea of othering, of mirroring, of doubles. It also includes this dimension of being underground or more generally invisible. And it includes some metaphors related to both spirituality and science. And I found that in these early films that I looked at, each of those things was occurring there and that really jumped out at me. So one of the things that was really interesting to me and really important in telling stories is representation. And when we consider representation of Black characters for most of film history, it's the advent of cinema till the 1960s or so, it's really a story largely of misrepresentation. And that's not to say there aren't exceptions, but looking at the totality, that seems to be the story. That seems to have shifted in a significant way for horror film in 1968 with George Romero's Night of the Living Dead, with Dwayne Jones's portrayal of Ben. And Romero sticks with this, giving us other films from the early 1970s and mid-1970s, which is this epoch of Blaxploitation, with Lloyd Holler portraying Colonel Peckham in The Crazies, and then Ken Foray as Peter in Dawn of the Dead. And so George Romero isn't the only filmmaker at this time, but doing some significant work. But again, this is representation, but not necessarily or not in voice. So we need to consider that dimension too. Not only whose story are we telling, but who is telling the story. So to look at that flip side, the other dimension, voice, added to our discussion. My investigation here was launched with 1/6 of one page in a book. I assigned a text for my science fiction and horror film course entitled Lost in the Dark. And there's, just a paragraph on Blaxploitation. And that really jumped out at me. It was the most curious thing I experienced in the entire text. And I wanted to learn more. And just a few films are referenced, but among them are Blackula from 1972, and then Black Frankenstein, or sometimes called Blackenstein, from 1973. So Blaxploitation obviously entails this term exploitation. And when I hear that, I, just speaking personally, associate that with negative connotations. And I wonder whom or who and what is being exploited. And so, just to get a simple dictionary definition of exploitation film, it talks about exploiting contemporary cultural anxieties. And so when I read that, I'm thinking there are people that are having these anxieties, be they characters or groups or members of the audience. Somebody is being exploited. And I saw a video clip with Quentin Tarantino, who's kind of dismissively arguing that, it's just an industry term, and it's not people that are being exploited here. It's just exploitive elements. And he goes on to list some of these exploitive elements and said, well, it may include naked girls. That kind of diffused his argument, and for me, it's pretty much pointing out that people are in fact being exploited. Tarantino and many others cites Jonathan Rosenbaum in Variety from 1972 is coining the term Blaxploitation. But around that same time, many other sources also credit to Junius Griffin, who was the former president of the Hollywood branch of the NAACP at the time. And it doesn't matter where it first originated. What jumped out at me is that many people did not associate the term with positive things. Now, others do. Blaxploitation is about Black power of the day. It is about political expression and political speech. And so there may be others that are not as concerned or that really embrace the term. Oh, it looks like we've got some slides that we can jump on through and catch up. So yeah. We just want to cycle through these. I'm at about 13, page 13.
I'm going to take my time and scroll through now that we got it up and going, because these images are so dynamic and interesting.
Oh, well, thank you.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Come on, Black Frankenstein, Blackula. Yes. Yes. We bring Nick back so he can enjoy it too. Yes. Okay. So you said 13?
Yeah. Here we are.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So I wanted to talk about this first film to be labeled Blaxploitation horror. And interestingly, if we just click ahead, you'll see that if we do a Google search, it is defined as horror fantasy. And I think that's a good thing, but that is not universally applied. So this was put out by a studio called American International Pictures, and Samuel Arkoff was the producer of this and many other works of the time. And if we click ahead, you can see what he proudly called the Arkoff formula. And if you eyeball that, you're seeing that, yeah, there's some exploitation elements there for sure. But the director of this film is William Crain. And my argument is that the director is the most important voice in this entire process. Yeah, we can look at the screenwriter, we can look at who produced it, but going back to auteur theory, which grew out of French film theory from the 40s onward and was coined by American film critic Andrew Saris, it's this idea that the director is the main creative force in a motion picture and is the author. And I believe that to be widely true. So let's consider Blackula through that lens. If we go to one of the early frame grabs here, we can see the exposition of this film in the next slide, where William Marshall portrays Prince Mamuwald. And here he is meeting with Count Dracula. And Mamuwald is imploring Dracula to help him suppress the slave trade. And within 2 minutes of the narrative, Dracula says, "Slavery has merits, I believe." And not only that, but goes on to bite Mamuwald and condemn him to a fate of eternal life, but tormented as a vampire, as we can see him converted here. Okay, so then we jump ahead to present day. And Thalmas Rasulala portrays Dr. Gordon Thomas, who is a pathologist for the LAPD. And I don't know if we're getting audio, but he goes ahead here, and you can tell he's somebody who gets things done. There are some interesting portrayals happening. There are openly gay characters. The portrayal is problematic, but I thought it was notable for 1972. We see women who are resourceful, who are strong, who survive. This image here that's in red, sort of this idea of the vampire's reflection not being able to be seen. In this case, a modern version, a vampire cannot be rendered on film. And I thought that was a great metaphor for the invisibility. There's a brief exchange here between Dr. Thomas and somebody he's collaborating with in the police department, where he says, funny how so much sloppy police work happens because of Black victims. And then the final, or not final, but near the third act, it's really a dynamic film. And in the third act, we've got a bunch of vampires coming to life. And this guy hesitates to take this one out, although he had no trouble when they were Black. Is it because it was a former colleague he knew, or because it's a fellow white colleague? I think both things are intentional there. At the very end of the film, we see a police officer shooting Mama Wald's love interest, and then he goes into a fit of rage and revenge. And so we see some escapism here. We see some fantasy elements here. But I think what's being communicated is really important and political. And so my argument is that we should be careful in just calling something an exploitation film, particularly that term, Blaxploitation. So by contrast, just 1 year later, capitalizing on the success of Blackula, which brought in about $1 million, we have Frank Saletri writing and producing this film, directed by William Levy. Saletri was an attorney. Levy's filmography just kind of drops off the map. Nothing really important here. The film is, by all accounts, really panned. Now, does a film like this deserve the label Blaxploitation? It is a story not told in the first person voice. And so, my argument is maybe so. A little bit more, just some of the elements of this one on our next slide. We have a Vietnam veteran who's lost all 4 limbs, and his love interest is Dr. Winifred Walker. And she employs the help of a Dr. Stein. So if we click through, we can see Winifred and we can see Dr. Stein. And on our next slide, we see this lab setup where there's this really prolonged sequence. In fact, most of this film feels like filler. And I like the microphone stand. That's a nice touch. In the very end of the film, we introduce this character who is chased and then carried away by Frankenstein's monster there, Stein's monster. And she has no backstory. She's just introduced to be chased. And so really poor writing there. Frankenstein's monster is taken out by dogs at the end. Okay, a few other examples here from that Blaxploitation era, which is mostly early 1970s, but some people define it as the 1970s. These were all by white directors. I think that's notable. And we can see those Google definitions and categorizations at the bottom there. These 2 films I wanted to give just a little bit of attention to because with Dr. Black and Mr. Hyde, we are returning with Crain as director, and then Ganja and Hess with Bill Gunn. So I'm going to talk about the second one first, briefly. In Dr. Black and Mr. Hyde, we see our protagonist here. And so our protagonist is Dr. Henry Pride, played by Bernie Casey. And he's a scientist trying to cure liver diseases. Yes, there's some exploitation elements here. I think that was just part of, I think that's production and market-driven circumstances and not the director's choice. Toplessness, language, themes of prostitution. But what's really happening at the core here is some really important storytelling. So he tries this serum on a lab rat, and the lab rat then turns white. Not only that, but it torments the other lab rats and ultimately kills them. So our hero decides to try the serum on himself to see if it really would work for helping humans. And there's a great transition sequence here where he sees himself in the mirror. And one of the side effects is that he turns white and thus becomes a monster because of it or associated with that. Okay, so Ganja and Hess. This one by Bill Gunn, I think, is an absolutely beautiful film, really important film. And as we see, Dwayne Jones returns. Dwayne Jones is playing Dr. Hess Green, and Bill Gunn is playing his friend George Maida. We see from on the screen here, part one, Victim. It's told like an epic poem in these parts. And Bill Gunn, playing the character as well as the director and screenwriter of this, reads some poetry that he composed. I don't think we're able to hear it firsthand, but if we just click for a moment, we can see this segment where he is reading poetry, and it really is powerful. But if we see what happens after this in our next slide, we can just go ahead. He stabs his friend with a ceremonial dagger that gives him eternal life, but makes him become addicted to blood. And when Dr. Hess leans over to find his friend like this who committed suicide, I thought he was going to render aid or just see if he was breathing. But it was really a visceral shock to see that it was so that he could drink the blood. Okay. I love the compositions and the grainy photography. We see an emphasis on emptiness and distance here. There are scenes that have sexual content, but they're not exploitative at all. As these next frame grabs will show, there's a loneliness. There's something that's, again, just extremely poetic and powerful. There are shots, as we see in the next couple here, that are just beautiful and for us to take in for their own sake. The depth of their symbolism we might never fully know. So Hess starts a relationship with Ganja, who was his friend's estranged wife. And then he, without her consent, brings her into this community by stabbing her with the ceremonial dagger as well. I think it's beautifully shot, a film to really take in and experience. So if we then look at what Wikipedia says, my point here is not that we should use Wikipedia as truth. I mean, we tell our students, be careful of that, but it is where a heck of a lot of people go and they take it at face value. So when I see this lead to the write-up, that it is an American blaxploitation horror film, with blaxploitation being the predominant descriptor, and some of those negative associations, I say, hey, let's have a conversation about this and think more deeply about it. So to summarize my argument here, I believe that blaxploitation carries certainly some negative connotations in many assessments, and we should be careful in how this label is applied to the works of past artists and their legacies. Additionally, on our next slide, I think we should use auteur theory, that this is a major dimension in defining voice and point of view in who is telling the story. Let's consider the director. And it appears that some of these films that have been historically labeled blaxploitation have been done so simply because of the cast, simply because of the director, or simply because they happen to be made in the early 1970s. We see, just on a quick Google search to learn about these movies, that it's perpetuated even today. So I argue that reassessment and reclassifications of some films using a director as the primary criteria should be explored. So when we get from 1972 to 2022, that's a 50-year jump from Blackula to Nope that we just saw earlier this year. And there's a big story in between that will be explored in other components of our symposium. But representation is evolving, voice is evolving, and the filmmakers of today, Jordan Peele, standing out significantly, are setting the stage for tomorrow. Thank you.
Excellent job. Excellent job. Thank you so much for that. I have so many questions, but I want to reserve the Q&A component for after we've heard from both of our scholars. I want to also share with the audience that you're watching on multiple platforms. We're simulcasting on, I think, 3 different YouTube channels, 2 different Twitter accounts, Facebook or 2, and LinkedIn. We're all over the place today. And so wherever you're watching, leave a comment or question in the comment section of whatever platform you're watching. And we will receive that comment, but we'll also be able to flash it up on the screen. So if you have a question for either Don or Nick and their presentations, their research, or if there's a burning desire question of some sort regarding any of the topics you're hearing today, feel free to put it in the comment and we'll apply to the Q&A. All right. Nick, are you ready? Now you are also sharing your slides, and I know we had some technical difficulties early as well. So as you get started, I am going to pull up your slides as well and take care of that for you.
That's perfect. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Well, Dr. Don, I could listen to you all day. That was fascinating. Welcome, everybody. Thanks again to the professor and everyone involved in this symposium. Despite the welcome arrival of Jordan Peele on the scene, there is and always has been a scarcity of Black horror. So Dr. Don mentioned, many films, but when I heard about the symposium, I'm thinking, well, what constitutes Black horror? What can I find? And there really weren't that many. There weren't enough Black horror films. The People Under the Stairs kept coming up, directed by a white boy, Wes Craven. So why are People Under the Stairs and another of his films, The Serpent and the Rainbow, lumped under the subgenre of Black horror? Absolutely, the auteur theory is important. The buck stops with the director, but also I would argue that an excellent cast of color can signify a Black horror film. And The Serpent and the Rainbow is an example of this.
So I think we just lost Nick for a brief second. We're going to have him come back on in a moment and continue with Serpent and the Rainbow. While we wait for him to come back up, because he's probably just now discovering that he's not on the call anymore, I'm going to talk to Donald and kind of harken back to that 50-year range of films that came out of, well, I'm going to put a pin in it because my guy is back. Here we go. We're gonna put a pin in that, Don. I know I had a burning desire question just now. We're gonna put a pin in it because my guy is back. All right. You ready, Nick?
I am. I can't wait to hear the answer to that. That was my cat who decided to take over the computer.
All right. You got it. Go for it.
All right. So yeah, I just wanted to give a bit of background about myself. Absolutely, I'm coming at this as a scholar, but also as a lover of film, a lover of horror movies. And I grew up in Bristol, England. My Uncle Robin showed me my first modern horror movie, Return of the Living Dead. Robin was a sweet homebody who wouldn't hurt a fly, but he and my nan, they both loved scary movies. So Robin opened the floodgates to films like The Exorcist and The Nightmare on Elm Street, which in turn brought my attention to the ingenious filmmaker Wes Craven. I saw that specifically Craven was using his films to talk about, things that were going on in real life. So The Last House on the Left, an indictment of Vietnam, for example. And I want to see more. So I'm 16, and The Serpent and the Rainbow is playing at my local cinema, the Gaiety. I've read the preview in Starburst magazine, and I'm stoked. And this little kid, I want to see this scary movie. I'm aware that the movie is inspired by Wade Davis's book. So he actually wrote a non-fiction book. This gentleman, Wade Davis. Okay, and I believe we can see a picture of Wade on the next slide as well. This guy from Harvard who was tasked with delving into the roots of voodoo. So it's a great hook for the movie. I drag Robin along and my mind is blown, partly by the creative special effects and disturbing theme of possession, but mainly by the incredible performance by Zakes Moquet, and he's on the next slide. He plays the venomous Captain D'Argent Petro. So fascinating was his performance that when I later saw him pop up in movies like Waterworld and Vampire in Brooklyn, I got warm fuzzies. That's my guy. He was so good in The Serpent and the Rainbow. So although he is the villain, he manages to garner sympathy for his devilish intelligence. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about The Serpent and the Rainbow. It came out in 1988, so 3 years after the book. And, you know, Wade Davis got criticized by his friends for selling the rights to his book so quickly. He said, I'm a graduate. I need the money. So I've sold the rights to Wes Craven. The movie stars Bill Pullman and Kathy Tyson. It's dark, unsettling, and exciting. We open not with Bill Pullman, the Caucasian hero, but we open with the Haitian community. A man is apparently dead. We become part of his funeral, the milieu, the landscape, and we're really brought into that world from the very first scenes. Bill Pullman plays Dennis Allen, so he's a fictionalized version of Wade Davis. Allen is sent to Haiti by a pharmaceutical company to solve a mystery. How can people be declared dead and then come back as zombies? Is there a chemical being used that could help in medical procedures and line the company's pockets, make them some money? In the noirish voiceover, Allen describes Haiti as one of the poorest countries in the world, a ruthless dictator in power. So we just saw the Duvaliers pop up there, Papa Doc standing and Baby Doc, who ruled Haiti at the time that this movie is set. So Allen is threatened by Captain Petro. He's head of the local brutal police force, the Tonton Macoute. Allen learns about the voodoo rituals from Kathy Tyson's character, Marielle Duchamp. He finds out how a zombifying powder is prepared. He finds out by really getting into the culture, finding out, you know, the rituals involved and meeting these amazing characters along the way. Well, Petro doesn't like Bill Pullman wandering around, so he tortures him and exiles him. Petro gets inside the hero's mind. When Allen gets back to the safety of the white US world, the other world encroaches. We have a hand coming out of the soup. We have a zombie attack. So although Dennis Allen, this character, does get out, there's no real escape for him. He has to go back. And he does. As the Haitian government collapses, Allen goes to confront Petro and rescue Marielle. So that's just a little bit about the story, but what's going on, you know, deeper down? Well, Bill Pullman is the tall, blonde hero. Petro even says he has a pretty white face, but the audience is supposed to relate to him and see the world of mid-80s Haiti through him. He's a self-proclaimed tourist. But as I said, you know, the story opened in Haiti. You know, we're really part of that world rather than Bill Pullman's world. Everyone is depicted as believers in voodoo. So they really believe that there is a spiritual element, that zombies are real. And the Haitian people are not shown as superstitious or underdeveloped. Our central guide into Haitian culture is Kathy Tyson's character. She's courageous, intelligent, and empathetic. Well, later she succumbs to the horror movie formula of being the damsel in distress. But for most of the film, She's a strong, highly likable heroine. We're really embroiled in the culture of the time. We really find out what it would be like to be under the control of the Duvaliers and the Tonton Macoute. And the Serpent and the Rainbow's scariest moments are not the Craven-esque nightmare sequences where you don't know what's real. Are you awake or asleep and having a nightmare? Bill Pullman himself said that they used pretty crude special effects. You know, if you look too closely, you can see the joins, but that's okay. The supernatural action is exciting, but really the scary stuff are the scenes of torture, loss of control, and the very human evil that was prevalent in 1985-86. So Jerome Reuter, he wrote for Diabolique magazine, said, in an example of Craven addressing growing American interests in the Third World, Petro mentions the involvement with the Grenadian coup of 1983 and how the United States would love to have anarchy in Haiti. Petro says, we can't be slaves again. America would like chaos. This isn't Grenada. So what was he talking about? Grenada is a Caribbean island north of Venezuela that the US and neighboring Caribbean nations invaded and occupied. This was a result of a governmental power struggle between the Prime Minister Maurice Bishop and his deputy PM, Bernard Coard. Bishop was killed, Coard took over, and Reagan stepped in with Operation Urgent Fury. Political prisoners were freed and a more cooperative interim government was put in place. So this had happened before in Haiti. In the early 20th century, America had stepped in, so it was a concern that it would happen again. That's part of what makes the bad guy more sympathetic. He does not want to be controlled. He does not want to be enslaved. Now, Duvalier, especially Papa Doc, used mysticism and voodoo, or vaudou as it's called there, to unite Haitian society. He called it the supreme factor of Haitian unity. He adopted a look mimicking Baron Samedi, one of the vaudou deities, complete with a black bowler hat and matching wardrobe. In an article for Time magazine, much was made over the president's public persona as a figure of the underworld. Time said, the look of him makes every tale seem possible, including hopeful talk that he really is one of the walking dead. His eyes are icy and hooded. His walk is measured by a robot rhythm, his voice a roomy whisper. He keeps his hands hidden and he dresses in zombie black. His features are chilled into a graveyard mask that makes him seem the very spirit of evil. So Papa Doc was really using people's beliefs, I won't call them superstitions, but beliefs to retain his power. Vaudou was mixed in with Roman Catholicism, which is the religion of the time, and much older African beliefs, you know, dating back several thousand years. So very strong, continues to this day. In an interesting turn of events, America did step in eventually, but they did not intercede while the Duvaliers were in power. So what's the real horror here? The Haitians couldn't escape those conditions under Duvalier. I'm going to get back to that, but what you're seeing right now are images from White Zombie, which is one of the earliest kind of movie proponents of voodooism as we know it right now. I wanted to show the ad for White Zombie because it's a great example of turning lemons into lemonade. White Zombie got bad reviews. So the promoter said when their noses turned up, business turned up too. So they're saying, we got bad reviews, but we made lots of money. So come see this movie. It's a really interesting aspect of Ballyhoo. The Serpent and the Rainbow equally tried to just dilute what the movie's about. The tagline was, don't bury me yet, I'm not dead. Or, don't bury me, I'm not dead. So it really preys on primal fears of premature burial and torture and that loss of control I mentioned earlier. I mentioned the supporting characters earlier, and I really wanted to get into them a bit more. Why is Zakes Mokai so good? He manages to be charming, scary, powerful, sympathetic, and formidable. He far outmatches Bill Pullman, acting wise and character wise throughout the movie. You do not want to mess with this guy. Kathy Tyson as Marielle. This was her first movie after Mona Lisa, where she really kind of broke out as an actress. Everyone was amazed by her performance in the British movie Mona Lisa, and she came and did this next. In both, she plays an exotic object of desire, but in the horror movie, she actually has more complexity to her character. And Bill Pullman had just come off of Spaceballs, so he was doing something different as well. He was switching from comedy to this dark kind of movie. Then we got Paul Winfield. He's Lucien Celine. He's really trying to build the mystery of Haiti. What we should be wary of. He says in Haiti there are secrets that we keep even from ourselves. We've got Brent Jennings, who's Louis Mozart. He's like one of my favorite characters in the movie. A TV character actor. Name a show and you will have seen him. ER, Hill Street Blues, Young Sheldon, you name it. For decades he popped up on TV. But here he's really allowed to go to town. He really gets a chance to be this character with multiple dimensions. And here's Conrad Roberts as Christoph. So he is zombified, and he portrays terror, fear, misery, despair. He overcomes his slavery. It's a fantastic performance with very little dialogue as well. So he's definitely one of the reasons why the movie is so memorable. I wanted to mention a bit more about voodoo, because obviously the filmmakers are preying on our expectations and what we think voodoo is, but also looking at the scientific aspects. So maybe there's more to this. Maybe there is a toxin that puts people to sleep and an antidote that brings them back out. So there's always a scientific explanation for zombies, or a possible one. Night of the Living Dead, it could be cosmic radiation. Return of the Living Dead, it could be government toxic chemicals, So there's never a character that says, this is why there are zombies. But we always like to have just an underlying possibility. And that's tied in with these beliefs that surface in this movie. Harvard boy Wade Davis, the writer of that book, he describes Vodun as a closed system of belief, and he's an outsider looking in. So it's definitely the first angle that we take. So although we've met the Haitians, then we're pulled in from this other angle. So we got really these two almost opposing views. So almost a central conflict, more important than the conflict between the hero and villain. Is it real or is it not? Alan asks the folks who tell him to go to Haiti, you really believe that? And they say, the Haitians surely do. So we're really going into that kind of belief system and unpacking it. So the white characters who tell him to go, the ones back in the US, they don't have a great regard for the Haitians. They want to use the magic of voodoo for altruistic means, but also, to make money. Zombonol is a joke to them. We could take this spiritual chemical and sell it as a drug called Zombonol. They think that's funny. So their world of posh offices and state dinner parties is a wanton contrast to the poverty we see in Haiti. It's only when Dr. Allen is attacked and the dinner party is disrupted that the Americans realize there's more to voodoo than a profitable drug. We only meet a few white characters. This makes sense for tight storytelling, budgetary reasons, but it also contrasts with the milieu we see in Haiti. The Americans are outnumbered and outgunned by voodoo and the power of faith. There's lots more I can talk about. I did want to mention, BET actually grilled Wes Craven. They asked him if horror films transcend racism. And he said, "We try to treat people of color the same as everybody else in our films." Especially and he's talking in 2011, especially for the younger generation, there's much less tension than there was even in the previous generation. People are going to school and growing up with each other. There is such a racial mix, at least where I live in California, it just seems a natural part of life. So, very trying to be colorblind, very optimistic, but this optimism shines through in Craven's movies. In Scream 2, he was commended by one of his cast of color for not killing him off early on. BET asked him what he thought of the notion that Black folks always die first in horror films. And Craven replied, "The thing that we're most used to, obviously, is African Americans being treated badly. The history of slavery. That is a deeply sad cultural prejudice that is shifting, but it takes a long time." So he's looking at the big picture. I wanted to tie this in a little bit with Get Out, since this is a Jordan Peele symposium. So possession, the removal of free will, is a form of slavery, and the captain enslaves Christoph, the zombie. And that is truly terrifying to anybody. Get Out uses our cultural fears to flip the script. So instead of going into scary Haiti, we go into this white world. The hero encounters a strange culture that acts unreasonably, and he's out of his depth. And sadly, that unreasonableness is prevalent in our society. The people are not what they seem, and the hero is paralyzed in both stories. To leaven the social reality of racism, the story incorporates humor and psychological thrills to entertain the audience. So both films share common elements, and also they reminded me of a movie called Society, an '89 horror film by Brian Usna. And in that one as well, the veneer of upper-class white respectability is scratched away to reveal a secret world where innocent youth is snared, possessed, and absorbed. All three films provide a commentary on America's obsession with control. So Craven does play with nightmares. Are we awake or asleep? Is his whole adventure a fever dream? I have to say, the character in Get Out is far more three-dimensional than the Caucasian heroes in either The Serpent of the Rainbow or Society. We've got all these fears that are kind of raised in The Serpent and the Rainbow, and how do we deal with any great fear? We have two choices, really. We can close our minds to it, hide under the covers, or we can open our minds and try and handle it, try and deal with it. But by opening them, we become susceptible to irrational fears. So what's the real answer? It seems to be you have to be cynically open. So have that open mind, but also that cynicism behind it. And that's the way to cope with this nightmare that we're dealing with.
Wow, this nightmare. Okay, first of all, before we get into our Q&A and dive deeper into both of your presentations, I just want to thank you both for lending your wisdom and research to this symposium, and certainly sharing with our viewing audience your perspectives on horror cinema and its relationship to real world society, right? Mm-hmm. I think about the nature of this particular session, the story of us, right? Let me go to the overlay. The story of us, Black horror in America. And I'm glad that you brought up The Serpent and the Rainbow and brought it out to the greater diaspora, basically, including Haiti and what have you. Yeah. But the story of us was a play on words, not only with the film Us, but also the US. And that this conversation of possession, this conversation of horrors, real or science fiction or romanticized, we have this fixation on defining ourselves through our trauma. in this country.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to us about what does trauma, how does reliving some of the most difficult eras of our history recreate a newly realized trauma for us and how we move forward? I think about Get Out, for instance, and even though it was an amazing film and it stoked a lot of conversations, it also reinvigorated this them versus us type conversation. How does Black horror continue to stoke those fires? How does horror fiction against reality continue to stoke those fires? And what is our fixation on American trauma?
That's a really good question. Yeah, because we want to bury our traumas. We don't necessarily want to deal with them, but the best way to deal with them is to discuss them, to explore them, to make art about them, and hopefully, not repeat what caused the trauma or what got us into the trauma in the first place. Basically just explore what the heck happened. So really, you also mentioned Black horror and us and them, and part of it is a marketing gimmick. We want a certain demographic, we want certain people to go see a movie. It's part of the movie hoopla, and like I showed White Zombie, a movie's bad, come see it.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's necessarily a good thing, even just to market a film a certain way. I would love more people to see Get Out or Us, but they won't see it because it's labeled as a horror film or a Black horror film.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Or it's one of those race films. We're gonna go and feel bad about being a particular thing, right? Yeah.
But we have to feel bad about these things, or we just bury them and stay there.
Yeah, we heard a lot of that same conversation with Django. When Django came out, there was a split. I can't speak for white folk, but I know among Black folk, there was a split between those who really wanted to go see it because they felt like it was going to be this therapeutic sort of redemption of whipping the master with his own tools, essentially. And as Audre Lorde has said, as she said in her life, the master's tools will not dismantle the master's house. And so I think we see that true also in the film industry, that there's this insistence in telling stories in the same way that we see the gatekeepers tell it, and we go, that just doesn't play. And so it's interesting, and I'll point this question towards Donald, because I think it then gets into what happened during the Black Arts Movement, as we call it, the Black Arts Movement in the 1970s, where we were a bit more expressive, not a bit more, a lot more expressive in our film and theater and television. And it was labeled Blaxploitation because of the factors Don mentioned in his work. Tell me, when it comes to those gatekeepers, when it comes to who holds the power and the control over the narrative, how is filmmaking today shifting that? How is filmmaking today? Because you mentioned, Don, in your piece in particular, there are a lot of the trends that we saw, 50 years ago in filmmaking. We're seeing them again today. How are we shifting the behavior in filmmaking so that there isn't one demographic, there isn't a privileged demographic that holds the reins on how stories are told?
Yeah, I think we're seeing a shift. Part of what I was talking about, director as auteur, but the real decisions are made by producers, executive producers, production companies. At the end of the day, it's financially driven. And in that era of the 1970s, I was even able to show a little bit about what was happening there. But with Monkeypaw Productions, for example, we've got a situation where the power and the decisions at that level are shifting. And we're getting stories told not because it's necessarily a Black story, but it's an American story. It's a good story. It's an important story. And I think this is part of a subtle shift that's taking place. And as I was saying, it took 50 years to sort of evolve to this point. But I'm really encouraged by where we stand now compared to some of these historical explorations.
Yeah. I think that's why I'm probably of who of the people out there telling stories now, I'm most excited about Jordan Peele, because he has a seemingly fearless approach to telling stories that belong to all of us, but are truly American stories. I think about Us, the film Us. Now I'm going to switch to the actual inspiration of this segment, and thematically, at the very least, we live in duality, right? We live in a space of how we present in the very open outside world, in the world that we all share in a common sort of way. And then there's a version of us that is much more reserved and held in private, right? The part of us that, okay, if we talk, we're gonna be frank here. We're gonna speak truth. The part, for instance, for me is when I'm in public, I have a very, there's politics of respectability kicking in. I have aspirations that will take me places where I don't need people, looking back and going, oh, that's what. But then there are times when I'm with my friends, or when I'm at home, and there's a very different persona. There's a very different story to be told. And what Jordan Peele has decided to flip that. He is showing the world the part of us where two black men are sitting in the car, and man, I told you not to mess with those white folk, and so what he has done is taken what we say in private, or what we say in the confidence of our kinfolk, if you will, and has made that much more public. And so then it puts on its ear who holds the reins on the narrative, right? I go back to Don's presentation, and I think about the fact that Blaxploitation films were made in great part because white people thought, or white men, straight white men, thought that these were the stories that not only represented Black America, but were most lucrative for their respective studios to show to all America, because that version of Black people kept a distance between us. I think I'm just ranting now. I'm like, wait a minute. I'm like, where's the question? What am I going to ask these gentlemen? I think on, and now I'm gonna do my part of a presentation, I guess. I think on two scholars from the Harlem Renaissance, W.E.B. Du Bois and Alan Locke, or Alan Locke, depending on who you talk to. And they had these two different schools of thinking when it came to Black art. W.B. Du Bois thought Black art should be used as a form of propaganda, if you will, to illustrate that Black people are worthy of being in society with white folk, that we have everything to offer that white folk have to offer. We should benefit in the same sort of way, and our art should depict that. And years later, you get shows like The Cosby Show, and you get films that show us, living in big houses, and basketball is our biggest worry. And I'm going to play for your heart, loving basketball. Excuse me. And then Alan Locke, he comes through and says, we don't have to do this for the white people. They're going to have to love us, drums and all. They're going to have to love us the way we are. We are angry. We do not belong here, but we are here. So now that we are here, we do belong here. And until they figure that out, we got to tell our stories the way we tell it. We're going to wear our afros. We're not going to perm our hair. We're going to play our drums. We're going to, play our sports. We're going to play the banjo. We're going to do all the things that are innately us as we are. And we don't need to put on airs for other people. So then later on, we get shows like Good Times and Sanford and Son. And now we get someone like Jordan Peele, who's giving us a hybrid of both of those schools of thinking. And what he is doing is showing us that we have the possibility and capability of being that Blaxploitation-esque Dolomite, Superfly, really fashionable, really dope, saying jive turkey, giving each other dap, slamming a basketball, but we can also be refined. We can be the kings and queens we saw in Coming to America and Black Panther. That Wakanda, even though it might be a fictitious place, it is not a false idea. And so I think on, and I'm going to get to a question eventually, I think on this session, and I have to admit, I was worried when you both sent me your photos, and I was like, oh, this, how we going to talk about the story of us in this construct? And I think what you have done is shown us that there is room for all of us to look at this work and marvel at it, learn from it. But what I'm most interested in then is, how do we become advocates of each other? Right? How do we become advocates of each other? Nick, how can we become advocates of each other in film education, to make sure that all of our voices are amplified? We're not looking at the gatekeepers who are going to define our work as Blaxploitation. Nick, how do we move forward in this industry and in these classrooms, amplifying all of our voices? Now it's a question. He's on mute. I'm on mute. I got you. There we go. So, I asked the question, then I muted him, and I wouldn't let him loose, y'all.
So one of the most powerful elements of cinema is that you can take that slice of life, private life, the places that audiences don't usually see, and you can put it up on that big screen. And I tell my students this as well. It is very powerful to see your own street, your own home, your private life, yourself up there. Filmmakers can take that, they can put that on the big screen, they can mythologize that life, or at least show it to people who would not otherwise see it. And cinema will really stick in your head. So, we can use movies as a tool to introduce people to new lives, new themes, make those connections, and hopefully, increase empathy.
Mm-hmm.
Increase empathy. Increase empathy.
Mm-hmm.
That's a t-shirt. That's a t-shirt. That's a logo. That's a mantra. That's a constitution. That's all the Constitution needs to be. If I don't, okay, U.S. government, I'm not saying burn down the Constitution. I didn't say that out loud on the broadcast and not like that. That is not what I said. However, if you decide you want to revamp anything, that's all you need. 2 words.
Increase empathy.
Increase empathy. I was going to say inspire empathy. I lost my 2 words. Increase empathy. Absolutely. Don, how do you feel about that? Increase empathy. How does our work in the classroom? How does our work in the industry with increasing empathy? How do we create change so that we don't find ourselves 50 years from now talking about Blaxploitation in the same way that we did 50 years ago?
2 things occur to me. One is coming with curiosity. I think authentic curiosity to want to learn, to want to explore is so important, that if everybody comes with that, we're halfway there. And then another big component of it, I believe, is setting fear aside as much as possible. We don't want to say the wrong thing. We don't want to offend somebody, but if it's with sincere curiosity to have a conversation, I mean, that's what we need to be doing.
Awesome. We could do this all day.
Yeah.
I think we could. We could do this all day. I am so thankful to have met the 2 of you. I am so thankful that you have shared your wisdom with us here today. I appreciate you beyond words. I look forward to seeing you in person. I'm going to come back to Fredonia. I don't know if I got a chance. Did you go to the conference? Were you at the conference, Nick?
I was, yes. Yeah.
Oh, I'm going to have to come back up there. I was there the whole time, too. I'm going to have to see you. Yeah, and next time I
was doing this, the sun came out. The sun never comes out here.
The weather was beautiful the whole entire time we were up there. I said to my wife, I said that weather in July was perfect. It's right there by the water. If you ever get a chance to go up to Fredonia, New York, just west of Buffalo, it's God's country indeed. And I'm going to roll through North Carolina and go to Asheville. All of it's God's country, quite frankly, because this time of year in the Piedmont region, in the Mid-Atlantic region, which is where I'm from Virginia also. Don, I'm going to have to come see you in North Carolina. And just thank you both profoundly for the work you've given us today and the work you do with our students. I appreciate that profoundly. I am going to close out here in just a second. I want to highlight what you're going to see today at 4 o'clock. We are not done. We just getting started, y'all. We just getting started. What's happening at 4 o'clock today? 4 o'clock Central Time. That's Central Time in the middle of the country. Because people are like, what time is it supposed to be coming out? And is it this time, that time? I'm like, no, 4 o'clock Central Time. We are doing an HBCU roundtable discussion on media and higher education. We have some amazing students who flew out to Los Angeles last week and experienced a time at the University of Southern California. Professor Mickey Turner at USC put together this wonderful grad school recruitment conference, if you will. Mickey is a dear friend. She went to Hampton University in Virginia, Hampton, Virginia. And having had that HBCU experience herself in her life, she understood and understands the value of going to a historically Black college and university. But now as a professor at one of the most prestigious universities in the world, the University of Southern California, she realizes that there are not enough students taking advantage of the great resource that is USC. And in particular, she wanted to make it her personal mission to invite more students graduating from HBCUs to this esteemed PWI. I'm sorry, because some of the people who are going to be on that panel are walking in right now and they're very excited and they're engaging and they're doing a little back behind the scenes filming over here. And so you're going to hear from some of these amazing people today, including Professor Turner. I am so happy to be at Prairie View A&M University. I did not attend an HBCU for undergrad when I was in school more than 25 years ago now. And had I known now what I know today, I don't know if I would have made a different choice, but I know that there would have been more options for me. And I'll explain what that means a little bit more at 4 o'clock. That's a teaser, if you will. We're going to talk about what it means to experience an HBCU education. We're going to talk more about the University Film and Video Association and how we are working with HBCUs to develop more opportunities and programming for our students. And so we hope you visit KPVU-TV.org/Symposium, where you can see all of our videos for the day, including the live one that's starting at 4 o'clock this afternoon. I do hope you join us. Thank you for joining us this session, and we'll see you in about 45 minutes. All right, y'all. Bye.